Hello and welcome to Ops Oops Origami. We're
Hello.
hello. So because I had to drop off early last week for a work call, figured we'd finish off this same topic. We also got a very good question on Facebook on the live stream, which I usually don't monitor for comments, so we'll touch on that as well. How's everyone doing?
Good. Yourself?
Good.
Good.
We've
Now that we've covered that.
We've established good.
Wow.
Introduction protocol done. Doo-doo-doo.
Yeah, pretty much. So, sorry, I'm just sharing some stuff out real quick here. All right, so how was everybody's week? Last week, this week, whatever you got.
I'll start with mine. I got the 3 new apprentices that are working underneath me now, so taking on a couple of younglings. 2 are in school from the college, and one's just one I met randomly out in town when I strangely went to Best Buy to go buy a video game. So a strange puppy that needed a little help in shepherding. So, so we're going to be having our first meet and greet later this week, and then we're going to start working on a project that will be helping out a local veteran-owned business that they've just expanded, but they're kind of struggling financially. Help them out through the pandemic. It's a parkour gym. So
Okay.
yeah,
Very cool.
should be fun. Give them a good experience. Give me smart hands, and kind of win-win all across the board there.
So the guy that's not in school, is he already working in the industry, or does he just have a degree, or is he...
She's at Best Buy, and I met her at the front, was buying the game, and just, you can just kind of tell from people. I mean, I have a paramedic sixth sense at times, and I was just chatting, and then, like, oh, she was talking about wanting to go over to Geek Squad and start doing desktop repair and PC stuff, and I was like, oh, okay. And you start chit-chatting, get a little background. She was in college for a little while, actually at Mount Hood, and dropped out for, I think, financial reasons or something. And so, I was like, all right, well, this is your lucky day. So let's chat. Like, well, you have 1 week to go. I bought an A+. I had some spare A+ certification tests from my previous school I did earlier. I was like, here's a voucher code. If you want to be my apprentice, you have to go take the test. No studying, just do it. Pass or fail. I just want you to do, because I can't make you do. And she did, and she scored really close, almost passed. But I was like, all right, I can work with this. You took initiative. You didn't. I gave until Friday of this week, so she got done early. I'm like, that's what I want to see. I don't want to see someone who's that squeaking under the wire or not do it at all. It's like, don't waste my time.
Yeah.
I can do that myself very easily. In fact, I do it often. So.
Yeah, that's a huge advantage to have somebody to take you under the wing and kind of show you the ropes, because there's a lot of people, even they get into their first job and there's nobody that really steps up to that role in like a mentoring capacity.
Yeah, and this is sort of me almost paying it forward, because I had an apprenticeship when I think I was 15. There was a local computer store. No, I was 14. That's right. I went to a local computer store that was in Milwaukee, Oregon, just outside of Portland, and there was a kid that was or a guy who was in my class. He was an 8th grader, and he talked about his dad's computer shop, and this was like '98. So they're like, "Oh yeah, we have a T1." I was like, "What's a T1?" Like 1.5 megs. I was like, "That's crazy, not 56K." And so
Yeah.
wandered over, and I just kind of started, I'd sweep up the shop and do all the kind of, low key crap work, busy work. And then when Mike, my mentor, and Tony would have time, they'd kind of show me how to build stuff, how to build networks and stuff like that. So, and that was a big kickstart for my tech career. I had built a PC before then when I was like 13. I actually robbed my college fund, if we can even call it that. It was like $1,000. It's like, I wouldn't go into college. Not with that money, and not with my grades. So
No.
I did okay. It was nothing. So this is kind of me paying it forward. I had really good mentors in the past, and I know it can make a huge difference in your life. So
Yeah.
I can.
Very cool.
and not everybody starts out with a whole lot of cash. I know I grew up poor. I was all about like Goodwill runs and like Salvation Army, stitching parts together, DIY duct tape. I'm like, I mean, it's a good way to learn, but if you have stuff like Cisco or Palo Alto, it's like, hey, if you want to learn, 10K. I'm like, ooh.
Yep.
I actually was going to go down the route of Cisco's Unified Call Manager, their UC platform, but it was so walled garden. I was like, well, I guess I'm not learning that.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Yep.
So just having
what I did
access
for
to
that-
resources is always a huge thing to me, and I like to see various underserved communities and go in, because particularly, I mean, I'm sure we all did really well during COVID, but and that's why I helped my buddy out at Revolution. It's like, yeah, a parkour gym that requires in-person workouts, they were shut down for months. It's like, so he was desperately trying to get remote training going on, and I was like, dude, I support you. I know this is just going to be a hard else, and I even told him at the time, I was like, this is going to be your Forrest Gump moment. All you got to do is be the ship that survives, because this ain't, nobody's rocking it. Just be the one shrimp boat remaining. And so, yeah, they've been doing okay. So they survived, which is really cool.
Very cool.
Nice.
Dude.
How about you, Richard?
It's been a Monday all week. Yeah.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Oh, geez. No, yesterday started off. Yeah, yesterday was absolutely a Monday on my Facebook wall, or whatever you call it. I put a GIF of some guy getting hit in the face with a shovel, and on the back of the shovel it said Monday on it. And it's yesterday, today. Hopefully not tomorrow, but we'll see what happens.
Yikes.
So it's a busy week. I'm doing my phone system upgrade on Friday, and I spent about 2 hours on the phone with Spectrum, telling them that I need them to re-IP their excuse me, their gateway. And they got two divisions fighting over who's supposed to do it. So who knows what's going to happen.
Those are the best.
Yeah,
like a
one
blast.
department, the I don't know why they have this. They have a tech department, the IP people, to do IP stuff, but then there's this move add change department that does moves add changes, And the tech people are like, we'll change the IP address, but if it doesn't work, we're not changing it back. And so you have to coordinate that with whoever, and whatever. I'll talk. There's another phone call that I have to make tomorrow. So
That's what happens when you have no competition in the area. You can be as much as a garbage human being as much as possible.
Well, we actually there's some SIP players here, right? So there's,
really?
Yeah. So AT&T will do it, and Spectrum will do it, and Verizon will do it, and everybody claims to do it. T-Mobile even tells me that they'll do it. But,
Really?
Yeah. So
T-Mobile bring a SIP? Huh.
they want my business. They were on the phone today saying, "Yeah, we've got stuff for you if you want to look at it." I'm like, "No, I don't." So,
hey Rick, I'm curious.
My cell phone carrier? No.
Yeah, I'm curious. Have you because there's a lot of web-based stuff like Voight.ms and whatnot. I know obviously local carriers direct SIP trunking is going to be fastest. Have you tinkered with putting an enterprise on a remote SIP trunk? Something like a more internet-based instead of local carrier-based?
The problem is that we have that Mitel system, and it is heavily ingrained into the organization. And even talking about making changes to how we do our voice telephony, it raises blood pressure all over the place. And
yeah.
I mean,
is it a lifeblood type of situation? Because I know if it's like sales based or you need the phones, people get super clenchy about any sort of change.
Oh yeah, but it's funny because they really like all the options that like Teams would have, or something from 8x8 or whoever these companies are now. Because they have the cell phone app that you can use on your cell phone for a soft phone, and a desktop soft phone from Mitel, and they all work fairly well. Well, they work
ish,
and so, and I'm like, well, Teams will do everything that this does. This will do everything that this does, and we're not tied to these SIP trunks, and we can get a secondary internet connection to make sure we've got this failover, and everything will continue to work. Plus the added feature of unplugging the phone from your desk and taking it home and plugging it in there, and everything still works, right?
Yep.
It's more expensive, but
well, it's more expensive than Mitel support.
Well,
I've seen those bills before.
Well, it's actually not horrible, right? I mean, the upgrade was under $4,000, including the labor and all that.
It doesn't sound too bad.
No, it sounds really low.
And I don't know. They're what they're doing is they're building up a new VM, and for the phone system and voicemail and whatever, and they build the new VMs, and then they just copy all the data over from the old to the new.
Yeah.
Right? And of course, it's like doing a SQL upgrade. It mostly works. So there's stuff that has to be done over it. But yeah, and then there's the the yearly support on the software itself that I have to pay for and whatever. But
yeah,
I don't know. We got 125 people that almost all of them need phones, and so Teams at best is what, $10-15 a month.
It depends on the licensing and all that other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just all about the control aspect, as I do a lot of, I did SBCs and whatnot, and I see a lot of folks going to operator connect at best, if not just putting it and have Teams manage everything. It's like, all right, that's a lot of eggs in the basket. Teams has to work, the carrier has to work. If something happens and you want to reroute calls, it's like, what are you gonna do? Like, ask nicely?
Yeah.
And then they'll nicely tell you to go pound sand. So
right,
some level of control is nice.
Luckily, Teams has gotten a lot better, especially basically since COVID. I mean, COVID was a huge gift for Teams, Zoom, Web. Everyone really upped their game because it went from something that's nice to have to basically critical.
Well, I'll push back a little bit on Zoom. I'm a Zoom hater through and through. It was their game to win. They turned unified comms into a verb. Like, let's Google that. They said, let's Zoom, and they still managed to fumble the football.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, your crap was so unencrypted. People were jumping in Zoom rooms left and right, messing with
Oh, God, I
corporations.
know.
Your UI looks like it's from the '90s. Like, oh, every time someone uses Zoom, I'm like, oh, what kind of, you're on the cheap, aren't you? This thing sucks.
And that, like,
Yeah, I finally let my sub lapse this last year because I got a personal one during COVID because I need something reliable to use. But yeah, it has kind of stagnated, and everybody else.
Teams is
Zoomed
they've
past
done a
them.
lot of things. Microsoft has done a lot of good things with Teams. Your call routing is much better than it used to be, and it is down on the user level now too, that where the users can handle their own call routing and whatever. So it's a lot better than it used to be. So and
Well,
I'm
a lot
kind of
of
a fan. So I actually like Microsoft Teams. It's one of the few Microsoft
Same.
products that I do like.
I think it's great. I think there's a lot of platforms now. Like, I mean, even something as simple as Google or Facebook, their messenger type of services and calls, they're perfectly serviceable and their UIs are fine. It's compared just like Zoom and even like WebEx. Oh, when Cisco pushes that, I'm like, you guys know this is brutal for everyone, right?
Yeah.
This sucks.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, and I just don't understand the companies that actually uses Teams for their phone system, for their communication system, and they still want to use WebEx for meetings with their customers.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense because they integrate pretty well. I mean, why take away all that functionality of
Right.
being able to just like pull people in and all that stuff to use two different platforms that do the same thing?
That co-location company at my prior company, Brian,
Yeah.
would do that.
Oh,
They-
really?
They had Teams as their internal phone system, but all their meetings were set up over WebEx. I couldn't tell you.
See, I
Why?
totally get like people who are still using Zoom. It just had mass adoption, so it's just like what people are comfortable with.
Mhm.
But WebEx is not used commonly. It's not intuitive. I honestly can't see a strong use case unless there's something I'm missing. Why you'd use WebEx unless you just hate yourself?
see, I don't think Zoom was as ubiquitous as Zoom would like us to believe it was.
That could be
Right.
true.
Because like,
It was adopted in the vernacular, so people were using it. Let's Zoom. Let's do a Zoom. They used it similarly.
so
Maybe not.
for
There.
I think at the consumer level, there was a bit more adoption of Zoom than like a WebEx or something like that.
Mhm.
But WebEx was a decent product, right? Cisco product.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. But let's be honest, Zoom, it's, maybe not be 10-year-old technology, but it certainly hasn't been significantly updated in the last 5 or 6 years,
In the
right?
last year, all I've done is Teams and Zoom.
Right.
So thank God I don't have anybody dealing with
Google
WebEx.
Meet,
Yeah.
for my money, is hands down the best product on the market right now for live meetings, right? It for hardware with end users, for performance, simplicity, it's right up there.
Yeah, Google Cloud offerings in general, I haven't really encountered them very often, but their usability for end users is great, and like in drive integration and the like is it's definitely helpful. Just because we can figure out Google.
That's awesome.
Right. I mean,
Nice.
the number of people like, oh, Google, it's so hard. Oh, Google, it doesn't work right. Like, what are you doing?
hmm And most of these platforms are not radically different. I mean, look, even the one we're using, it's like there's a picture of a microphone, of a camera, and there's usually a gear icon and maybe like a little screen with an up arrow or something similar. It's like,
Yep.
if you
Oh.
can't figure out between
Mhm.
platforms, there's not really much hope for you.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. All I'll say is, like, my mother, smart lady, but she will readily admit that she's not like any kind of power user. I successfully transitioned her to Docs, Sheets, and Gmail. Like, we cut the Microsoft cord. And she was a dyed-in-the-wool Microsoft user for years at my prompting. But it's like, you know what? I don't think you need it anymore. And sure enough, she doesn't.
Yeah.
For the home user, you know, somebody that's not in a corporate or office setting, cutting the Microsoft cord makes a ton of sense, right? Even to the point of getting a type of Linux distribution that's usable, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you've got somebody who can support it, right? Like, I will say that for the home user, Windows or Apple, sorry, throw up in my mouth a little bit there, but those are perfectly good products for home users. They can get good support from wherever. You know, when your computer guy goes missing, dies, whatever, like, you're not dead in the water. And I think that's, no matter how much you want to be there for the people you're supporting systems on, if you're providing like consumer grade support to people and you're pushing them to Linux, I think you're doing them a disservice.
Oh,
right?
sure.
You're kind of trapping them into that support model. And everything's fine when it works well. It's when it doesn't that, like, you've ruined their life.
Yeah. But typically those people that are simply just using a computer, right? They're not going to get in and tinker around into the guts of the computer. It's fair. The Linux pretty well fairly protects itself. I think it protects itself a lot better than Windows does.
Yeah. I mean,
inadvertent settings changes and things like that. In the Macintosh people, the Apple people, most of the time they're not like just casual users. They are dyed-in-the-wool Apple people, right? They buy Apple because they buy Apple, right? I have an iPhone.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
You know, so
it's just like it's like vegetarians. How do you know you're talking to an Apple user? Don't worry, they'll tell you.
They'll tell you, right? So there's that. I mean, so I have no issue. I mean, I would actually build a Linux laptop for my mom. I think she would, because all she does is click on. Well, she Googles, right? Well,
Right.
How do you get your mail, Mom? I Google.
So for people like that,
Sounds like a Chromebook.
right?
Yeah,
Chromebook
you know
all
what?
day.
That
And
Chromebook would be perfect, right? So,
although the Microsoft files will be like, "Well, just get a Surface," and I'm like, "You mean get a bunch of problems?"
Yeah.
I think I've always been like hesitant to recommend Linux to end users just as wholesale, because usually if someone's asking, they want just like a daily driver and an internet browser. I'm a through and through Apple hater, but I won't deny that their UI is simplistic to use, and I think Windows has its appeal too. I think most distros of Linux tend to be a bit much for people because it can be a little bit too different. Some of the more modern implementations have made it definitely more user friendly, but I still would hesitant outside of like Chromebook. I think is perfectly fine, but any real Linux distro, I'm kind of I'm a little on the fence on that.
I mean, the thing that I remember for end users is like, if I'm giving them a Chromebook, I need to be confident that all they ever need to do is browse things on the web, right? They're never going to need to open a Microsoft package. They're not going to try to run additional software, because like there's no QuickBooks for the App Store.
No,
right?
there is not.
So
There's a lot of web apps though nowadays. So
Sure,
yeah,
but like if they're ever going to need a thick client for something, Chromebook's out. But for a lot of users today, because there's so many web apps, they don't need that, right? When it comes to, and this is one of my things with a Linux distro, if you're talking about a full-blown PC, I firmly believe that while Linux works great and the user experience, I think actually is pretty close to what a Windows experience is until you want to run software, right? There's you're probably not going to get Fortnite or Diablo for Linux.
No, probably not. But that's I wouldn't suggest a Linux machine for somebody that I thought would do something like that, right?
Right.
So most of my family, like my mom and my brother and his wife or whatever, all they do, right, is surf the web and do some email.
Right.
That's
And see, that's
really
where I think a Chromebook
everything
is
that they
like
do
perfect.
is web based.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, whatever. And the best thing I think about Linux, if I were to do something like that, it'll run on the hardware that they have.
That's true.
Yep.
So it's not like it's going to be an expensive proposition that's going to fail, and I'm going to get, people are going to be mad because we spent all this money and we went down this rabbit hole that produced nothing, right? So if it doesn't work out or whatever, we don't have a lot invested in it. And at that point, I can go get them a cheap Windows machine, because you can get a Windows machine for a couple $100,
Right.
a good one. So
Yeah, no, I'll agree with that.
There's a local
Raspberry
reseller.
Pi.
Yeah, there's a local reseller here called Free Geek. Although reseller, they do training for the community and stuff. But they'll get an old Windows laptop that is running some ancient version of Windows, and they'll just slap on a modern Linux distro, and you get basically a refresh machine. I think that's a perfectly valid use case for recycling hardware, upcycling type.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like to see all that old hardware go away, because I'm old and it just reminds me of my mortality.
Don't worry, Rick. We'll turn you into Linux one day.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm still hoping
Give you that
that,
honor.
that somebody can port OpenVMS to me. So
And don't worry, it won't be one of those crappy distros. It'll be something nice like Red
something
Hat.
nice. Thanks for
Classy.
thanks for chuckling at my OpenVMS remark, Brian. I think you're the only one that understood it.
Yeah. You get that thing deployed yet?
No.
No.
No,
Is it
again, we've had a lot going on that it's competing priorities, but now once I get the phone system done this week and people recover, we've had this big trade show that we've been gearing up for, and it's happening right now. And then I'm going to let people recover next week, but the week after we're going to start tackling getting that hardware retired. I'm going to take it over and put it in your garage.
Yeah. No. I finally got rid of the SGI and the Sun Ultra 3500 or no 4500 that were in my garage.
Did you donate them to a museum?
No, somebody that worked with us back at B Plus. So.
Yeah, I mean. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's.
Oh, I was going to say the Mac UI. I will say that it is simplistic, but I've observed adults and students trying to onboard with both Windows and Mac OS today, and there is basically no difference in the learning curve.
Yeah, for somebody starting out, I believe it.
Yeah. Going from one to the other as already a seasoned user in one or the other, to try to make that flip is
horrible.
Yeah.
I actually think it's easier to go from Mac to Windows than the other way around.
You think so?
Yeah. Also,
what makes you say that?
The number of users that have gone that I've seen go from Windows to Mac is actually pretty high. The number that I've seen go from Mac to Windows is lower, but just the sample set that I've seen, the ones going from Mac to Windows seem to have an easier time of it.
I wonder if there's a factor of growth model. I kind of think, again, this is my Apple bias wearing it on my sleeve, is it's baby mode for Apple, and then when you grow up, you're like, oh, okay, I'll do something a little more advanced, such as Windows or Linux, as opposed to the opposite. If you start on Windows and you go to Mac, you're like, this thing feels like I'm chained in every way humanly possible. And that's always been my frustration with Apple. It's like, well, that's because, hey, do you want to do any sort of editing? No, you can't. You didn't say the magic word. It's like,
No, I don't follow you there. But I think that we, in our particular, the four of us, are control freaks. We like to manage our computers, right? Whereas the Mac people, they don't give a rat's ass what's going on with that computer, as long as it turns on and they get that ba-bong sound, and they can log in and get into Final Cut. Right.
My
So
my challenge with Macs and Apple computers is that I only ever like the only reason I'm looking at somebody else's computer is because something has gone wrong. And with a Windows computer, I have options for how to help them, right? With an Apple computer, I don't. And it's not because I just don't know it yet. It's that it's not there, right? Um, just calling Apple support is indicative of their approach to supportability on their product. It's like, hey, I'm having, how do I get support on my Apple? And the response will be like, Apple computers are designed to work reliably without user intervention, so you shouldn't have any problems. Okay, but I'm having a problem. Don't worry. Apple computers are designed to work without having any problems. So you
Yeah.
like it becomes this like
We've
all
been
they know how to
assured that
do
the
is
problem
say,
you say you're having is impossible. So
it is.
have a nice
It's so
day.
funny because I've got about a dozen Macs in my environment, and I have zero issues with them.
sure. And I will say that they are zero issue systems most of the time. But you know what? If you scale them to the point where you have as many of those running as diverse an application fleet as you have on your Windows systems, I guarantee you will have basically the same number of problems.
I always think of, have you guys seen it's an older show cartoon now, but Avatar: The Last Airbender?
Yes.
Yep.
Love
There's an
that show.
episode where there is no war in Ba Sing Se. There is no problems in Apple Land. What
Right.
my Apple's crashing. There is no problems in Apple Land.
Right.
Oh God. Oh boy, it's gonna be weird.
So I've made the Macs crash. I've made those Apples crash and whatever. I mean, I've done, purposely trying to figure out what it'll take to crash one, and it can be done, but it recovers extraordinarily well. And I'm not a Mac fanboy, right? I have a couple, but they're put away in a dark corner of the basement, and I don't use them because, frankly, I can't do the things on a Mac that I need to do to do my job. So it's just easier to have a PC, unless I want to run, and I could do this, run Parallels or VMware
Like dual boot?
Workstation or something like that, or dual boot or whatever. But I
Right.
simply don't want to do that. And yeah, it's just.
I think
Well, that's
my
kind
my
of why I
observation.
stopped.
Oh, go ahead, Brian.
That's kind of why I stopped running Linux on my desktop, because for probably about 10 years I ran Linux on my desktop, but then I started getting real heavy into photography, and well, there's no Lightroom and no Photoshop on Linux. So I started using that. But these days, I mean, I'm already running multiple VMs on my PC for specific things I need to do. Most things I do on a day-to-day basis are either going into a VDI, RDPing somewhere, SSHing somewhere, or a web app of some sort. The number of actual programs I need installed on my PC that I can't do the exact same one in Linux is relatively small these days.
Yeah.
So, hell, I could probably go back to Linux now if I wanted to.
Probably could, right? Because I mean, you don't have to have a program like Putty or something like that for SSH. You just
Yep.
SSH.
I mean,
right?
you don't need Putty anymore for SSH on Windows.
Well,
PowerShell has it built in.
Yeah, but
Right.
do you use it?
Yeah.
Do you really?
Really?
I've tried.
Ooh.
their shell kind of sucks.
I mean,
I like
it's rough
Putty
go.
way better.
Yeah.
Is it
Can't-
any
can't
different?
Well, they can't get copy and paste to work properly still.
Actually, the newest
Not as
versions
good as
of
Putty.
PowerShell, the newest versions of PowerShell work just fine. Control
Okay.
V.
You can actually
whatever.
select text and it comes
Yep.
through sane now.
Yeah.
With the right
Okay.
mouse click, it pastes and
Yeah.
all that.
So,
stuff.
like, keep in mind, I'm not talking about CMD, right? Like,
right,
I'm talking about PowerShell.
Yeah, PowerShell. Yeah.
Actually, Windows in their in Windows 10 and 11 have actually a pretty good terminal program that you can download for free that will give you like really fully developed terminal capabilities in basically any sphere you want.
Really?
Yeah, it's I encountered it on a lab, I think for F5, and I was like, what is this magical tool? Now I don't use it because like old dog, new tricks, but I looked at it and I'm like, I'm eventually going to start using this.
Yeah, if it's the same one I'm thinking of, I started using that one when I did Windows subsystem for Linux, or you flip that, Linux subsystem for Windows.
Yeah.
Which is actually pretty cool. I had to disable it though because I wanted to use VMware Workstation, and because of the Linux subsystem for Windows uses basically the VM capabilities in Windows, and it conflicts with VMware Workstation. Oh yeah.
So it's this guy, and like I don't have much.
Yep.
Like this is just stock PowerShell command prompt, Azure Cloud Shell, and Git Bash. But like the more stuff you install that has a terminal, the more you're going to get here. So like if I want the Git Bash, I've got one.
Yep.
And it's pretty capable. So
there's a SSH tool that I found a few years back at the previous company. One of the companies I worked at, not to shill too much, but Secure CRT, where I can get multiple tabs open for various platforms or servers. And that beats PuTTY out any day and almost any other tool that I've encountered, just to be able to do it at scale, because I'm jumping between routers and switches and firewalls. It's just like, right. I need to have multiple open, not a whole bunch of PuTTY things, just having tabs. Oh, it's such a lifesaver.
I'm so used to using PuTTY that I've tried using like PowerShell and all that. I not PowerShell, Secure CRT and several others that do like a tab. I just can't. It just doesn't work for me. The 50 PuTTY windows open actually works better for me, and it makes no sense whatsoever.
You lunatic!
I fully admit that it's stupid.
Well, it's like trying to walk away from Notepad++.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah.
Why would you?
So, honestly, if you really want a great tool for terminals and whatever else you might want to do with tabs and what have you, if you're going to switch off of PuTTY, I would go for VS Code. It has a decent terminal. It supports multiple formats, and like it's super capable.
And what terminal?
It's considered an IDE, right?
Yeah. I mean, so that's the other thing. If you're working with scripts at all or config files, it's going to give you a ton of stuff that's going to help you there. But it, I think it's undersold as like, yeah, it's an IDE. It's actually a lightweight IDE, but like I can do a variety of terminals, and this is just like, it's just what I have installed, right? And like this is full PowerShell, but then I could like, if I had PowerShell in my editor, I could use it like the PowerShell IDE, and like, well, it knows in this case that this isn't runnable. But if I was working on a PowerShell file, it'd be like, execute this line of code, and it would run it in my terminal. Which kind of that, build up a list of commands and then execute them in order in your terminal. That's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I'm still hung up on this terminal emulator thingy that you're talking about.
Yeah, no, it's cool.
You used to clicking two wires together.
Well, I mean, I have an alpha, right? So I'm looking for, what is that, VT420 or whatever that emulation has to be, right? And we're buying software to make that happen.
So I would look into Windows Terminal.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look.
I bet you can find something.
Because PuTTY almost gets it, but not quite, right?
Right. So. The thing I like about PuTTY is it's got some of those like built-in scripting things, like run at connection.
Right.
That's nice. I don't use it very often, though. Like, that feature is almost completely gone in my life.
I kind of started exploring more stuff along the lines of like utilities once again. Like I have a kind of shell form a little bit, Display Fusion. They run Steam, and I tried them, and it lets you like slice and dice up your multi-monitors to your heart's content. It's just like productivity tools there's so many good paid options, and they're pretty darn affordable. And it's just I've been really impressed. Like, like putty, I've gravitated away from it because it's just too singular, with me needing to do like multiple devices at once. So tools of scale are just like worth whatever the price they are to make productivity go through the roof
Putty is
and help my
perfect
sanity.
Putty is perfect for a single-threaded guy like myself.
If you're only like working on one thing, and I still use putty from time to time, especially if it's on like a some client machine or something that I only need one thread, Rick. Perfectly acceptable.
Yeah.
But then the issue with putty is the like local connections, because if it's like comp something, it's because I'll build up like a bunch of cell routers or Cisco routers, and it like generates a new com, so I gotta like go into the device manager. Okay, but with Secure CRT, I can just hit a drop down and it says whatever's the active one that's connected, and I can do that. So
that's cool.
Oh, that's handy. It actually resolves them, because I hate that, because sometimes I'll have multiple console cables hooked up to like my laptop or something if I'm like, I don't know, doing a deployment or something, putting new gear in, and trying to. Every time you plug them in, it could be the same cable. You plug into the same port, it's the same COM port. You plug it into a different port, it comes up as a different COM port that a different one was before.
Yeah. If you're using like a USB to RJ45, then you're fine. It'll be the same one every time. But with Cisco, if you're using that micro,
not every time. No,
not every time.
Well, okay, fair enough. But definitely with the mini USB to the front of Cisco devices, it generates a new COM channel every time. Oh, as long as it's not the same one. Because if you're doing like multiples.
Because the USB to serial adapter actually lives in the router.
It's in the device.
Switch.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
So if you're like, I'll build up a whole bunch of routers, and it'll just be like, and then I'll go into my device manager. We have like 27 COM devices that I gotta like delete each time. I'm like, all right, this is gonna be my next hour. Delete, yes, confirm, delete, confirm. Like,
or you just unplug them, and they should go away on their own.
Oh no, they still live there. Yeah,
they really.
They'll stay there.
They've gotten really bad at pruning.
27th my record so far. I built routers in a row.
Yeah. Impressive.
I'm not able to. I'm way too. I can't multitask like that. That's way too much stuff going on for me at one time. So I don't know. Maybe I'm kind of old school, right? I mean.
Oh, I wasn't doing them all at the same time. No, it was relatively sequential. I do like maybe 2 or 3 at a time, but it just saves them. So if you get one done, I create like a little factory. I do 3, and then one's done, and I poke in the next one, and it just builds that list in the device manager.
I try not to do any more than I have monitors. If that makes sense. I got 3 monitors at my desk at work, so I'll work on 3 devices. And then I'll work on 3 different devices when I'm done with that. Because if I try to work on too many at a time, I'm going to get confused, and I'm going to booger something up. So,
well, if I may recommend, I highly recommend you look at Display Fusion. You can slice and dice the monitors, and if you double click on them in that one of those like spaces that you sliced up, it'll go full screen within that cut. Yeah, so I'll cut it to like, because I've got a 40-inch 4K monitor as my secondary, and I'll just slice it into like 9 fields, and I'll just go across there.
That's where they really
4K monitor for my secondary.
I keep it on the money.
That's where the big monitors really come into play, is when you do use a tool like that lets you carve it up into multiple segments, I'll say. Words, but it's the same as having 3 monitors.
Big, large monitors like that. I just last week put 27-inch monitors on my desk at work.
Wow. Really?
I actually prefer the 24-inch monitors. Other than that, they're too big. They get too much. It's visual overload, right? So
I like 24-inch 4Ks. That's my go-to.
I can't afford the 4Ks, so I
Ripple 4K 40 inches or bust, boys. This is full knock. Yeah. No.
At that point, information density is too high, right? If you've got that much content,
you're
not keeping track of it. Sorry.
Are you riding my bus, Chris? Are we on the same bus?
You bet.
All right, buddy.
The old man bus.
Well, I think the best case scenario is like ultra wide monitors, because Windows handles those like really poorly, in my opinion, because it just like going full screen on like putty on a wide, like ultra wide. It's like this is basically useless, and I would love because that was
Well,
some of
that's
that worked out
some
at
of
ultra
that's
wide.
Windows, some of that's putty, but anyway.
Well, it's like being able to slice that, like, because you can only do, you can lock it into dock it into the left and right sides. But I'm like, what about just slicing it into thirds would make way more sense when I'm doing stuff to sort of like to be able to kind of slice and dice the monitors to tune it to whatever, like, if you're doing something of scale, you're building, like, at times I'll build like 10 routers at the same time, or that'll be my thing for the week. And I'm like, dude, if I can get this done in like a couple hours, like, nice. Go party or whatever. Because it's usually like times of scale in which I really want to be able to tune stuff, and it helps so much. And just most of the Windows default tools just don't handle Windows particularly well,
Right.
or it's really limited in scope.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The default Windows stuff is rudimentary at best.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
All right.
In your 40-inch 4K monitor.
Now that we
I know.
are
Poverty wages.
now that
The
we're logging
80s were out of
zero
stock, so I had to
viewers.
settle.
Yeah.
I apologize for my poor behavior.
You should be
Not your
ashamed.
I'm sorry. Shame. Well,
Yeah,
I hang
here
my
you
head
are.
in shame.
Confess.
So, let's talk about consultants.
No. Sure.
Oh,
Open the
we're
topic.
almost an hour
Wait.
into the call. Yeah.
Only
Yeah.
46 minutes.
We never said we were efficient at what we do. We just
Yeah.
said we were good.
We just
Yeah,
do it.
exactly. So, last week, we had what I believe to be a pretty good question from somebody on the Facebook version of the live stream. So, there's a friend of mine that runs an MSP. So, his question: hey guys, you started this with sharing some negative experiences working with contractors and MSPs. At least one comment was made that implied perhaps non-technical people were making the decision to outsource. Yes, we did. Some comments on never hearing from the MSP or getting billed on things not agreed upon. Curious if experiences with contractors and MSPs has been overwhelmingly bad, or if there have been some positive experiences here. What were the factors that made for the positive experiences? Has it often been the case that a non-technical stakeholders have pushed for or decided on outsourcing? Almost always. Has that been part of the issue?
I think this is a great question.
Chris, go ahead. Go ahead, buddy.
No, I think he's touched on some great points here. One, no, it's not universally a bad experience. I've had contractors that are really excellent partners. I like to think that as an MSP, I was a really great partner.
Mm-hmm.
But I would also say that there were certainly times as an MSP that I knew we were underserving our customers. It's kind of the game, right? You want to have as many customers as you can carry without them leaving.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Like, welcome to capitalism. There's a little bit of personal pride and like just ethical behavior, right? Like you're not going to take on, hopefully not going to take on 60 customers when what you have capacity for is 6. But yeah, I've absolutely had good experiences, and I don't want to mislead people into thinking that like hiring contractors is always going to end poorly. And I think that dovetails into his next question. Which is, what was the differentiator for good experience versus bad? Well, the good ones engaged with the technical staff, right? And the best experiences were ones where we brought contractors on after a good, real review with the on-site technical staff, right? So it's not the non-technical stakeholders just saying, hey, here's your contractor. It's like, hey, we think we could use a contractor. And the technical people go, yeah, here's the stuff we want to work on. And then you engage contractor, you go through a selection process, and you bring them on, right? I think
And
it's
that's
better
kind of like
Go ahead.
a force multiplier, right? And that's what I always like about contractors. Particularly, I think the value of MSPs is like if I'm a shop of 2 people on a IT team or network, whatever, a very small team, and we have like a whole bunch of bulk stuff that I simply can't scale to cover. I don't know. Let's say I have 100 routers. I gotta basically clone and make the same settings. It's like, oh, this would be nice to have a small army at our disposal for a temporary time. And I think that's where MSPs really have a value added. It's like you can scale up and scale down really rapidly, and with usually a fixed rate. Maybe there's a slight increase for temporary stuff or whatever, but force multipliers are fantastic.
Here's my issue with that scenario, Travis, is that in my experience, when I have my 100 routers to use your example, and I call my ISP and I say, well, I need that small army. All of a sudden you hear, you can almost hear what's going on in their head, the ching, 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 ching that they hear. And they want to make a full blown, right? Yeah. And all of a sudden there's a project manager involved and you got to pay for his time. And there's, okay, now we got it. And they develop this big plan to get this stuff done. And all I need is 5 people in a room to, you take your 20 and you go, right? So that's one of the things that I've experienced, and I throw up my hands and say, okay, we're done. This conversation's over. You're taking it way too far. This is not what I wanted. It's time for you to leave.
Yeah, right? and I definitely understand that perspective. I've seen it that myself. I think that's bad faith acting type of stuff. If you have a good contract that you're like, hey, I kind of like contracts that are, a certain amount of service level, and then you sort of get, I don't know, you can call it tokens, maybe 3 tokens a month to ask for some special stuff. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to burn that token for like 2 days to get some force multiplication, an extra person or two to burn that up. You have this sort of little bit of a slush fund that's baked into the contract, so to speak, as opposed to like nickel and diming each part. Yeah, because I've seen it too. I see it more often. I mean, my sort of scenario is more, it's not theoretical entirely, but it's definitely not the common case. It's usually, and that's where I question MSP values. Like, okay, you're going to pay a fixed amount, and then if you actually need work done, you're going to pay more. Like, why am I paying for the base cost?
You don't give me we're monitoring your system. We've got I'm sorry.
Yeah, Rick knows all about that one.
Oh yeah,
you're not doing anything.
Right, like when they're like, well, we've got our monitoring and remote management systems. Like, okay, are you actually monitoring? Like, are you looking at systems in ways that I'm not looking at them and alerting me to problems or fixing problems on my behalf, right? Sure, then I'm willing to pay you. But if like you've got a set of remote management tools that make your job easier and my job too, right? Don't get me wrong, it's going to help me. But like, if these are tools you need to do business, then I don't want to pay for it.
Right.
Right. Like, I don't want to pay more for them. I want to pay a reasonable rate and understand that, like, you know what? When I work for a retail IT shop, yeah, the retail customers are ultimately paying for me, but I'm not like, oh, real retail customer, we're also going to give you a register surcharge, so we can ring up your transaction.
Right.
Right. Like, cost of doing
business. In your situation, Travis, where you got that 100 routers to do whatever, I wouldn't even go to an MSP for that. I would go to somebody like Tech Systems or one of those people and say, I need some reasonable engineers that know what they're doing. Send me 5 or 10 or whatever, and we'll get in a room. I'll get them started, and I'll pay you by the hour until it's done.
Right.
Basically, a temp service.
Yeah.
Right.
So
that's what we're using for
Rent-A-Tech. Right. So, because the MSP, like I've said, I mean, I've had to fight this battle several times, and not just here where I'm at now, but in prior existences at other places where they come in and I've actually been that MSP where they say, oh, we need this done. And I was pressured by our management to go in there and run with it. well, if they're going to do that, we need to sell them this and that and the other, and let's get as much out of it as we can, right? So I've been kind of on the both sides of that fence, and it really sucked on either side, as far as I'm concerned.
And I think we kind of need to look at it. I don't know. This is just maybe my philosophical take. Is have to recognize that there's two components, and while they tend to be fused together, you have the technological and the force multiplication factor, and then you have the business or accounting, whatever. And I know they're generally married together, but as far as like someone's asking like, what's the value of an MSP? Like, this is their value. Now, how much you're going to pay for that value? Well, that depends on who you've contracted with, if they're acting in good faith or if they're acting in bad faith. Because I definitely see the bad faith actors more often than not. I worked for one myself too, and I kept trying to squeeze the boss. I was like, hey man, like what's the sal? What do we promise them? And he was like, just do stuff. I'm like, well, I got to make sure that what we've promised is what we're delivering, since I'm the person physically here. And I've seen more often than not MSPs will just do exactly what you said. It's like, all right, the whatever the cost of our service is monitoring or some nonsense that's valueless, and then when you actually need real work, it's like cha-ching time. Like
So
how did that work with us, Chris? I mean, we charge so much a month per device, and they got so much time for upkeep of that device, and if there were problems, we charged by the hour?
No, so it was the majority of contracts, at least by the time I got there, were they paid a monthly fee for kind of basic maintenance and whatnot.
Yeah, Windows updates, things like that, making sure their backups were run and
right, and
that sort of stuff.
And like they had built-in site visits, right? And you'd give them a couple of hours, and you'd spend a good chunk of that time doing the maintenance, right? Like that was rolled in. And then I guess if there was something that rolled in that was significantly more than just kind of the basic maintenance level stuff, then they'd get billed for that. Like, oh, you're changing ISPs and you need to roll your email server around. Like, that's not part of the basic offering. That's going to be 2 hours of work,
If you I think if they bought a computer from us, they got a discounted rate on onboarding that computer and getting it set up or whatever. If they bought their own computer, then it was a straight up hourly thing.
And they got a discount on their hourly rate too. Like, customers could call us and say, hey, we need some services. And we're like, absolutely, here's our hourly rate. If you were one of our MSP customers, you got a discounted hourly rate as well.
I didn't know that.
I think it's really weird that when I look at MSP pricing, so a lot of stuff, it's like a linear scale, but it doesn't necessarily correlate to like the workload. So if I'm doing, let's say I need to build 100 routers, or let's say 100 servers, let's go virtual to make sure to take the hardware out of the equation for the most part. It's like, all right, I need to build 100 servers, let's say in Azure, AWS, and it's like, oh, and now I need to do 200. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's going to be twice the time and cost. You're like, no, you're just going to put 200 instead of 100 in your infrastructure as code and then push it out. It's like, it doesn't translate to like double.
It doesn't scale like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's like bad faith pricing models. Like, oh man, 1,000 servers. Oh, that's going to be so much more work. I have to put another zero in front of that 100. Like, it's not that much work. So if you price your per device, like, you're not really doing that.
Well, it depends on what the server is. I mean, if you're just standing up a bunch of bare out of the box servers, well, yeah. But you're going to have to touch every one of those and do something on them.
Right, yeah. Some of them are going to be SQL servers, and some are going to be web servers, and some of them are going to be some sort of app server, and some of them are going to do this and that and the other. And back in the day when Chris and I were working together, back in the day, there were no virtual servers, and there certainly wasn't cloud servers that we were pushing stuff to. There was none of that. So AWS was in its infancy, right? So, yeah.
I do agree it's not quite linear. I mean, there are economies of scale.
It's factors, yeah. It's not like straight trajectory 1-to-1 linear ratio.
Correct.
So, and that's the parts that always like. Well, it's funny because when I I was a consultant when I was, I think I was 15, and I was hired over at Deloitte and Touche, and it was me as a 15-year-old kid, and there was like 6 other contractors, and what they were doing was at the time we were using Norton Ghost and cloning drives over the network, and so what the
Postcast
other,
server. You betcha.
huh? It worked
Done a lot of
great.
that.
Yeah, so we'd go into, they had this like huge meeting room that we were in. They had like a wall of laptops that needed to be, imaged or re-imaged, and the other contractors would just plug in the computer, they would plug it in the network, and they'd run the ghost and just hit enter, and then they'd go like BS for 2 hours or whatever. And so what I did was I'd like, well, I have 7 Ethernet ports, so I'd get 7 computers, line all up, and just do like a factory assembly line, and I did that for like a month, and they fired all 6 of them and hired me on full time because they're like, you're worth more than all of them. So we see you working hard. You put out way more than them. And it was like,
Wow.
yeah, I was like, this isn't harder. It's just I don't go, do 5 minutes of work and then bullshit for 2 hours. Like, not shocker.
Well, no, you do 10 minutes of work and then go bullshit for 2 hours.
Yeah, it's not even that much more.
But you get 7 times as many done in that 2 hours.
Yeah,
You're
it
usually
was
kind of
just like,
savant.
it was just like the craziest thing. I'm like, and I think I remember talking to them like, why don't you do more? They're like, getting paid by the hour. I'm like, well, I mean, we're not really doing hard work, guy. I'd been doing like flipping burgers or whatever, and I go to this job where I'm making, as a 15-year-old, like $25 an hour in the late 90s. It's like, minimum wage is like $5 or $7 at that time. So
You were
I'm
making $25 an hour as a 15-year-old in the late 90s?
Yeah, it's pretty dope. They wanted to hire me full time as a 16-year-old. They wanted me to make me a network admin when I was 16.
How much an hour?
25.
Jeez and rice. That for Deloitte, you said?
Yeah.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, that's why.
There are people now.
Yeah.
Financial services.
Yeah,
They
it was in
don't.
Big Pink. The Big Pink Tower, which is like their headquarters over there.
Yeah, they don't understand what money is.
In the late 80s.
I did. Oh, it was nice, dude. I was crazy rolling with money. Like all my peers were like, "Oh man, I'm doing like whatever. Let's go do some stuff. I don't care."
I think I made $13 an hour in the late 90s, and I was rolling it. I was happy boy, man. Maybe $18 an hour.
Now, I guess it was
services,
contractor. So, but yeah, it was because they saw what I was doing and they're like, "All right, we like the way you think and you just get stuff done better than everybody else." I looked like such a dope though. It was pretty funny. I'd go to like people's desks when they hired me full time, kid, but it's like none of my stuff really fits all that well. And they'd actually have, it was Jeff Tabler was one of the guys. He was the IT head honcho. I think he was technically like the CIO there. He would walk around with me because he's like, yeah, I don't think anyone's going to believe you, man, that you're a tech. It's pretty funny.
Like, is it bring your kid to work day?
Yeah. I had the tie that was like way too long. I was like, trying to play grown up. It was pretty funny. But
time for Boy Scout popcorn already.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, give me the sheet. I'll buy some, you little rascal.
Right, just go away, damn it. Whatever. Here.
You want the beer, kid?
Little nugget, yeah.
But no, it was just like really funny to see that. As a teenager, it was like we were talking about MSPs, and I kind of take that whether I'm full time or contractor or MSP, whatever I do. I'm like, these people are paying for my services or something. I expect that they're going to want value because when I go to, the mechanics and they're going to like, the repair is going to cost $500. And you're like, what does that entail? Oh, I'm going to take out one nut and replace it. And like, I don't believe you, 500. But and the same thing is like someone comes in and like watches me where I'm working on any device and I'm just like sitting there for hours doing nothing. And then I like push a button once and you're like, what am I paying you for again? Like there should be some sort of reverence for your clients.
Right.
Respect.
Now, there's absolutely times where you may sit there for 2 hours to push like a button every 45 minutes, right?
Mhm.
And when they look at you like, why am I paying you? And you say, do you know which button to push?
Exactly.
It took me 20 years to figure out which button to push and when. So.
And when, yeah.
Well, yeah, and there's obviously, the physicality. If I'm sitting there, but I'm like monitoring a network with like, my monitor, I cut the system map up. You're like, okay, there is a value that's occurring. It may not be like oh, me. I'm clicking on the mousies. I'm doing mousy things. It's like, yeah, this is knowledge work. It doesn't translate exactly the same.
Yeah.
But there should be something.
So yeah, so Rick, have you ever had a successful contractor or a good contractor engagement?
Yeah, there's one on the panel right here.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Which
What-
one?
What's the differentiator there for you? What made that go well?
Well, and to be fair, I mean, and we're talking about Brian here. And to be fair, Brian and I have worked together for a long time. And I went in as I needed him to do a specific task, and I also needed him to teach me a lot of things. So I knew that he was going to be the guy driving what needed to be done, how to do it, when to do it, and whatever, right? So, and to be frank, Brian's not always the best teacher, but he did get the work done, and he did show me what I needed to do, right? So that was a successful relationship, and to this day, we have a successful relationship because we do understand how we communicate to each other, and we get the work done. That is really, for all intents and purposes, what I need to have happen from any of my vendors. I need them to come in and try to understand, be open-minded about what I need to do, not push that, well, this
Whatever
is how
I'm
I
selling
always do
that
it in
week.
other places. I've been doing it for 20 years. This is what we're going to do here too. That doesn't always work. So that vendor needs to be open-minded. And I also need to be open-minded to that vendor, right? So there's some responsibility on me to make sure that I'm open to these suggestions and whatever, because they're the person I'm going to. They have the expertise that I want to employ, right? So
That's kind of one of the downsides of some MSPs is wherever the nuances of your issue are, they're going to sell you their solution.
Right.
Because that's what they deploy and that's what they support. Whereas me, I mean, I'm not with an MSP. I don't care about any of that. I want to help you find the best solution for your problem, whatever that may be.
But that should be part of being an MSP too. And I think that too many people drink their own corporate Kool-Aid. Because I've had tons of times, whether I'm as a consultant or an MSP or whatever, I'll be like, look, man, we're not the best solution for what you're trying to do. I could tell you on it. I could, if you'll listen to my sales pitch, I'll do it. But if I'm being honest with you, and people respect that, I'd be like, I don't think we're going to be a best bang for your buck. And I've had times where people have moved on, but then their conditions changed and they came back. They're like, because you were so honest and you didn't try to shill, that's why we're at least re-engaging with you, and we might actually pick up your services. Like, people respect that you respect them.
Actually, that goes a lot further with me, that honesty and like being forthright and all that. That's way more important to me than their technical ability.
I have worked for a company that employed, I actually have been responsible for vendor relationships where we've asked vendors to do things that were not in their wheelhouse, right? We knew we were going to overpay them for it because they would get it done, right? And they're like, yeah, we're not the best. You should be talking to, I had an HVAC person. It's like, you should have your electrician do this. I'm like, my electrician's too busy. Or you should call your building maintenance people to do this. I'm like, yep, that's great. But I know you're going to get this done. And they're like, oh, okay.
We should not be the guys pulling cable at the Cudahy Towers downtown.
Right. And
maybe they'll even do it right because you like, oh, you can go with your building maintenance people. It's like, yeah, they'll do it. But
we ended up hiring our electrician at a company I worked for in the past to be our landscape company. Because they owned the equipment, they were close by, and they would do the job. They would do a job. They'd do it on a regular basis. They'd show up, no problems. The bill rate wasn't too crazily high, but we'd run through a string of landscape contractors that were just horrible.
Well, here's an interesting value, like, because I've kind of looked at this too. So, full disclosure, at the house we have like a maid service that comes in every 2 weeks, and they charge like $120 a pop, and it's like the amount it takes off our shoulders, because it would be spending hours doing the job, and they do cleaning all day, so they do the work in like half, or not the quarter time it would take us, a better quality, and the value that I pay is pretty minimal, all things considered. And so there's a value proposition just in that, but also like the mental load, and that's something that people don't think about. It's like, oh, every time you go with a new vendor or potential one, there's always that little something in the back of your mind that's like, are they going to hose me? Do I got to babysit them? Are they going to do it right? Am I going to discover something? If someone's like a guarantee they make good stuff every time, yeah, you're going to pay a little bit of a premium, but that punch is going to land, and that there's a lot of value in that, to me at least.
Yeah.
Buy
And I
once,
would say
cry
that-
once.
Yeah, I would say that's one of the things that if you're starting out with a new vendor, if you're the vendor, you need to communicate that you understand that stuff, right? Like, I understand this is new. I understand that you're skeptical of me, and you should be. Here's what I'm going to do within the first week, within the first month, within the first quarter to demonstrate to you that I'm the right choice for you, and then follow through on it, right? Communicate clearly, help us alleviate those fears. And then also, like, I think his question, like, get your technical people involved, man. No matter what you're hiring a consultant for, you've got somebody technical on staff. If you don't, close your business. Just saying, right? Like, if you don't have some technical people on staff and you're hiring out every technical capability, you're going to be taken to the cleaners way more often than you should be.
Right.
Agreed.
So like, but like, engage your technical people to help you vet that consultant. They know the language better than you. They've got a better bullshit sensor in that regard.
And before, during, and after the engagement, like at any point, you need to have someone who knows at least roughly about what's being worked on, so that, if I bring in someone from accounting to look at any networking stuff that's been done, they'll be like, it appears to be networking, looks good to me. And like, you need someone who actually knows their stuff, so they can see like, oh, you cut corners here, this is not how this is done, fix this. If you get to a certain part where someone's just, you're babysitting all the time, and they're just not doing their stuff,
Yeah, that goes back to the question that Brian put on the screen, or the comment that one person put on the screen about the non-technical people, doing whatever. And I meant to bring this up back when we were starting the conversation, is that there are some people that are technical in, their application developers and their SQL people and their quasi systems people, but they're not network people. And those are the people that procured, and developed the relationship with the MSP to take over the networking or whatever. I mean, that happens too. It's not that they're non-technical. It's they're not technical in the area that they're trying to get service about, right?
Well, and like,
And that's
a
when,
piece of arrogance, right?
what's that?
It's either being uninformed or it's arrogance to not understand that, like, there's a wild difference between understanding how to develop software
Mhm.
and run projects and understanding how networking works.
Mhm.
If you don't know anything about that field, you like recognize your shortcomings in vetting a vendor.
Right.
yeah. And that's like going to always be like somewhat of a risk, and that's like unfortunate reality of any business. So if I have a company, and I'm bad at systems, I'm bad at like Windows servers, and so I'm going to hire a contractor that does servers. It's like, well, how am I going to know whether this person's full of crap or they're good? That's just the risk you kind of got to take, and hopefully you have someone that can help vet that out. But that, like,
Well,
in
that's
fact,
when
I'm
you
new in
have to-
something
you have
someone's
to do
teaching
your-
me. I don't know if they're right or wrong. I
Right.
just want,
Yeah, that is a real thing, right? But you have to do your due diligence and do your research and ask for customer testimonials and things like that, and do your due diligence. You should never ever hire the first people you talk to without at least talking to 2 or 3 other vendors,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
good strategy.
at least talk to 2,
mhm.
right? Before signing on the line with anybody.
Make sure they're not in cahoots with each other. Hey man, you charge double, I'll charge double. We'll see which one they pick.
Yeah.
I've got one that I think is actually really important. It's kind of almost antithetical to what you think, Rick, and I know because me and Brian chat about this. The value of an external person, contractor, MSP. I love a bull in a china shop. If we have a culture or a technical area that's absolute like a steaming pile of crap, I'll usually be as an internal person be like, this sucks, it's garbage. And they'll be like, no, it's not. And then an external person comes in and says, hey, this sucks, it's garbage. And they're like, I never thought about that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. It's like,
You got to be careful about that kind of stuff too, because that bull can come into the china shop and rough up the wrong guy. Right.
I mean, I'm entertained at least, either way. At least
You know what,
if it's already a steaming dumpster fire, it's like
Travis,
it can't be stage 2.
can I ask you a question? What's
Yeah.
the longest you've worked for a company internally?
3.5 years, maybe now.
Yep. If you've been someplace 5+ years, you recognize like the cost to a business to piss off the guy that knows all the old stuff.
Yeah. You got to be real
Is
careful.
super. He may be a complete turd and worthless and do like half the work he should, right? But the cost to replace him is insane.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah,
pain
well, what if the guy
you will
that knew
suffer-
everything was already scared off a decade ago?
Fair.
Or
And now it's people that
retired-
think they know everything.
or just retired in February.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, usually they'll always be because I've been in a couple of places, and I always make that like a real big point of myself, whether I'm new or as a contractor. I look for the aces, and I usually have signs like when we talk about looking at desks. I'm like, all right, this desk is crazy. This person's who I need to talk to, and that's been pretty consistent. So pissing off the actual good person, I don't do. But if it's like because I've seen golden children that are like their title was way not deserved, but there's been some people who are golden children that they did earn their tiger stripes.
Yeah. In my case, the golden child owns the company.
Yeah,
So,
Well, I've pissed off a lot of people and gotten fired at times. They'll never say that I'm fired because I pissed them off. They'll just be like, your employment or your contract's terminated. I'm like, hey, is there any reason why? They're like, nope. I'm like, all right, cool, bye.
Well, I mean,
You were an a-hole anyway, so bye bye. I don't care. Like,
let's be honest. If you're ever firing somebody, you should. If you're ever telling them why they're being fired, you're making a mistake. Right? Like,
It's a liability.
yeah, just don't put yourself under liability.
I think it's cowardice, but I understand legally you're correct. Yeah.
Rosie,
I mean,
that's Travis.
Keep in mind, this isn't the military. This is
Please?
there is recourse for people that are dismissed for illegitimate cause, and because we live in a litigious world, there are going to be piles of poo that are going to come after you for it, right? So just don't put yourself in the situation. If the person doesn't know and they want to know, you can say, you know what, I appreciate where you're coming from, and I'm sorry that I can't tell you, but you know what? Very rarely has somebody been let go and not have an inkling of why.
I always just ask. If I'm there, I'm like, hey, man, was there... And I usually softball it more times than not, unless I'm just pissed at them. I'm like, hey, is there any reason why? Like, is there something that bothered you? Is there something... I usually even say, is there stuff I can improve upon? And they're like...
See, that's a decent question.
Yeah,
like,
that is
okay,
a
this is a dumb conversation then. All right, I'll see you later, dude. Because I had one, the last place I was truly... I don't know if you call it firing. And here in Oregon, it's like your employment is terminated. I'm like, okay. It's like, and this was at an EMT place, and AMR would do temporary contracts there for like filling in gaps. I'm like, hey, do you mind if I come back and work 8-hour shifts supplementally through AMR? And they're like, yeah, that's fine. I'm like, okay. Then why are you firing me at all? Because you're perfectly okay with me coming back as a temp, just not as a full-timer? Like,
There must have
usually
been
if it's
some
something
weird
bad,
reason.
they'll be like, don't ever set foot in here again or something like that. And they're like, yeah, we welcome you in, no problem. I'm like, well, you could just not fire me. but
See, those end up being financial considerations.
Yeah.
But
oh,
again,
I very much know what that one was, because they wanted me to help out with their computer stuff because another guy did and he left, and I was like, well, EMT is $18.50 an hour. Server and network administration is going to be $25 an hour, and in the Portland area, that's a pretty darn good deal. And they were like, "No, thank you. We want you to help." And I was like,
I want you to help me.
I want you to help,
Help me
for
help you.
cheap."
other
like,
duties
nah,
as
dog.
assigned.
Yeah.
The question that I'd have for you was, were they asking you to help in lieu of doing your EMT work? Like
In
same
addition-
hours? In addition to?
It was during that time, but it was in addition to, so I still had to do the other stuff as well. So it was like,
my response would have been like, I'm happy to help, man, but I don't have the time. And then when they ask you like, well, can you stay late and do it? We'll pay you, time and a half. Like, you know what? I've got stuff going on. And then,
I didn't like them at all. So I just wanted to put him in a psychological bind where he'd have to say no to a good deal.
It's
was
a
a
place
jerk.
that sounds to me like a place you didn't belong anyway.
No, it was the last place that I worked medically before I moved on to IT. And I was like, this is a sign. Like, I'm supposed to work in IT. It's just that people won't pay me until I go, get degrees or certs or whatever BS I got to do. He was also just like, I've encountered a lot of people because of my military background and like with special operations that they like try to intimidate me. And I'm just like, dude, wrong person. Like, you ain't scaring me.
Nowhere with that.
Yeah.
I've spent 10 years looking at death down the barrel of a gun. Like, you 45 years old, barely able to stand 800 pounds, you don't intimidate me at all, man. This is just weird. What are we doing? But I get a lot of that, and I was just like, all right, I still get it in IT. It's just weird.
We would get the I don't remember. Do you remember the grocery chain, Chris? The guy that owned and operated the one grocery chain here in our area. He was like, he was pretty good with computers and stuff. So we'd argue and fight in whatever, and then pay for licensing and and it was just those guys are difficult to deal with too. I mean, now I'm on the MSP side of the conversation, and so yeah, I understand what you're saying about. Yeah, well, can't you just do this? Because I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. Well, we just, here's the CD. Can you just, go ahead and get that installed?
Yeah. Or you'll see, what I see a lot is this sort of like this bad faith negotiation. We'll be like, hey, how's your documentation? How's your servers? Oh, they need a little bit of help. And then you go there and it's like everything's on fire. Like, a little bit of help, huh?
Yeah.
Someone lied. Big time.
That
like,
I never cared about
nuked.
because people often underestimate how bad things truly are, and go into an environment and you can see the smoke from the from the parking lot, and you walk in.
Is that a little bit of help, or is that a lot of bit of help?
Yeah, and you go, okay, well that's fine. We'll get it fixed for you, and I would give them an honest estimation in what I truly thought what it was gonna take, right?
Sure.
And here's what it's gonna be, and if you want to get started, we'll get started. Right? I have no issues with that. It's when they tell me it's a dumpster fire and it's not. That's more frustrating than anything. Well, there's nothing for me to do here. Why are you wasting my time?
Getting
you're
paid.
in good
I mean,
shape.
I'm not going to complain. But I'm so used to the other side of like, it's a little bit of a problem, and then, it'll be a couple hours, we should be fine, and you just show up and everything's on fire. Like, what the? Like, and there's a level, like you said, of just technical knowledge or non-knowledge. They're like, they wouldn't know. But there are some tech people that they know I call it toxic positivity. We're like, oh yeah, no, things are hunky-dory, all in fluffy land. And you're like,
toxic positivity. That's awesome.
Yeah. Oh no, everything's great, guys. It's like, we're here at midnight on a Saturday. I'm pretty sure things aren't so great. Oh, no, don't think that way, man. Don't be negative.
But it's only the third Saturday of this month. We might have a Saturday where this doesn't happen.
Yeah, right?
Could be with those.
It would be the first
thoughts,
one this
don't
year,
get it.
but wouldn't that be dandy?
Love to
If you
spend
keep
a
saying those
Saturday
negative
night with
things,
my
we won't
wife
get that
out
for
at
fun.
a steak restaurant. Yeah, so sure enough. All right, before I bail out of here, because I've got about a minute, and I'm gonna bail out of here.
Yeah.
The drink of choice tonight, Travis. What are you imbibing in?
Oh, I'm so basic. I do the same one. Stickman, the bee's knees, the mead beer.
Knees.
My
Mr.
jam.
Chris.
All right, what about you guys?
I started with a little bit of gin and tonic. I'm slowly working through the Baileys, and now I'm gonna have myself Sam Adams Black Lager.
Oh,
Nice. All right.
Yeah, it'll
Drink
get
or
it
Brian?
done.
Brian, what are you doing?
I just had squirt with some bitters in it, which is excellent, but not really alcoholic. So
Easy, you lush. Pump the brakes
Yeah.
a little bit. Jeez.
yeah.
Slow your roll, pal.
it's long days these days.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
And
What
I
about you,
haven't had
Rick?
anything to drink, so
What?
non-alcoholic, alcoholic, nothing. No, I forgot to bring anything down. So,
oh.
well,
I also have my
that's not
mason
true
jar.
because my liquor
of
cabinet
water.
is right there. But I just
All right,
didn't
we'll do
do
some
that.
damage for you.
You
There
need
you
one of those
go.
long arm things, Rick. Like so you,
Grabber
reach out.
things.
yeah.
Crabber.
I think next week I'll open up a bottle of Weller and give that stuff a shot. So
Mhm.
Right
Which
on.
Weller you got?
the green label, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I remember which one the green is.
Special reserve.
Okay.
Nice.
I misplaced my church key.
I think Chris has been doing quite a few of whatever his drink of the night.
Yeah. I don't know
Chris,
how.
I got to
old
say
it is.
that book trips me out every time, man.
As it should. Painted it myself. I'm not gonna lie, this is very derivative. It's a combination of like 2 or 3 pieces of art
Hmm.
that existed. Somebody could probably try to claim that like I stole their intellectual property, but I changed it substantially enough in all cases that like, sorry suckers, if you wanted to claim that, you needed to make this image.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
But-
I think it's man. I think you did a great
Yeah.
job. It's
Yes.
definitely giving me the creepy vibes. Jeez, that's definitely worse. Yeah, you put that
Yep.
back down. That's nightmare fuel.
I mean, that's the whole point, right? It'll be your best friend, the dictionary, for president.
Oh, very
Mm.
perfect.
I have other stuff
Excellent.
that'll eventually get rotated in. It's just that these two are conveniently sized for the space I'm in. Someday I'll roll in the on-air sign again.
Nice,
So
as you should.
yeah.
Anyway,
All right.
Awesome. Yeah, good time to wrap it up.
Yeah, this is fun.
Yep.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you, everyone that joined us. Thank you, everybody that joined us.
Right.
Hopefully, have a show next week, and we'll pick some topics.
we
We have a short list of a couple that are.
Actually, I think next week
Candidates.
is our
Oh,
known
yeah.
guest coming on.
yes, 20th. Yeah, that'll be our project manager.
Yep.
He's a consultant project manager. So, yeah,
Where's he out of?
Cool.
local.
Oh, he is local. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Chris has met him.
Yep. Good guy.
He was down in Jamaica with us.
Awesome.
So yeah, it's been a friend for a long time. So yeah, friend
You're
of the
making me
family.
crazy, man.
Yeah.
So,
Know why that gets me every time.
well, on that note, so tune in next week for a conversation with the project manager.
Same
Yeah.
bat time. Same
More
bat
Yeah.
time.
puns. Puns for days, folks.
Yes.
Puns for days.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.